Hey guys, this is Bruce, and welcome to Convocourses.com. Every week at 1 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, I talk about cybersecurity issues, mostly cybersecurity compliance, and we just kind of open topics. Sometimes I'll have a topic and I'll just talk about that. Sometimes I'll teach. But today we're just going to do open topics. If you didn't know, I run a site called Convocourses.com where you can learn from scratch how to do risk management framework as an information system security officer. Also, how to get in this field. I'll talk about how to get a remote job and stuff I've been actually doing for many years is what I really talk about. And if you're interested in this, just go ahead and check out Convocourses.com. And let's get into this. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. I've got a couple of questions that people have asked me on Facebook, on YouTube, that I'll be addressing. By the way, if you want to follow me on Facebook, I'm there. Just search for Convocourses.com or just Convocourses. Actually, I'm on YouTube. I'm on Twitter. Convocourses everywhere. Convocourses. All right, let's talk about what's going on right now. I'm not going to get into the politics of everything that's going on. That's not really what this channel is about. But one of the things that happens whenever some kind of a world event happens, whether it's a war or it's a natural disaster or any kind of issue, people try to exploit the headlines, right? When there was a disaster in the Philippines, people exploit that and say, "Hey, send me money." It's scams and things like that. And now you've got all kinds of phishing stuff going on about the issue going on between Russia and Ukraine. And then when there was a collapse in 2008, there's all kinds of criminal activity going on around. Just people trying to take advantage and exploit other people's misery. It's just unfortunate. It's an unfortunate part of human people do this kind of thing. It's just, there's no way around it. But what I wanted to show you is a couple of sites that I go to kind of avoid these kinds of things, and gives you more information from a trusted source that you can that is the right, that they're going to steer you the right way, and to give you some idea of what phishing attacks are going on, what kinds of major exploits are going on around that particular event, because sometimes it gets very confusing and you don't know what to believe after a while, So there's a couple of sites that you can go to. There's a very trusted source. Twitter and social media is really not one of them. They're not good sources. One thing you got to do is look at the sources. Whenever people are saying stuff on Facebook or Twitter or even YouTube, like, you have to consider the source. If they're getting their sources from a large news organization, right? You've got to always do your own research with that, right? You got to remember they're pulling their source from a biased news organization, and then that biased organization is getting their news source from where? You should ask that question, right? Critical thinking and critical reading, right? That means looking at the source. Consider the source. The source matters on where they're getting their information from. But there's a couple of critical sources that you can trust, and what you want to do is also look at multiple sources. Don't just go to one source. That's the main thing. Don't go to one source when you're looking at different kinds of phishing or cybersecurity attacks or new cyber threats that are exploiting things like the Russia-Ukraine event, or that's exploiting things like a disaster that hit, like an earthquake or something like that. People are always going to exploit these things, and I'm just going to give you a couple sources that I go to that will pinpoint some known vulnerabilities that you should know about. One of those is the CISA.gov site. So CISA.gov site, I think formerly it was called the US CERT site. I go to a lot. They've got what's going on as far as national, state-funded threats, cyber threats that are going on all over the world. Some of the main attackers, they have whole units that are good at what they do. They have units that are very good at what they do, and they've earned their spot here on this site because they're constantly in motion. They're exploiting organizations all the time. They're exploiting different departments all the time within other countries. And so you can actually look at some of the cyber threats that are nation state funded or backed. Like if we go to this one right here for Russia, you'll see that there was a Russian cyber threat. There's a Russian cyber threat overview. It breaks down like some of the attack vectors, some of the organizations, the APTs that are constantly attacking, or some viruses or worms that they've put out to exploit certain. And this is not to say the U.S. doesn't do this kind of stuff. All countries do this kind of thing, to be honest with you. But we're in the U.S., so they're looking at threats that are coming in from other places, and mainly those are coming from Russia, Iran, North Korea, and China. Let's see. So yeah, you can get some lists here. Another really good one is MITRE. MITRE has a really good breakdown of some of the advanced persistent threats and the organizations that perpetuate those. Really good breakdown of those on MITRE, and maybe I'll go to that one next. Let me just see if I can go to some of the tips and alerts. Okay, so I'm on, if you're joining me late, I'm on the the CISA.gov/US CERT site, and I'm just looking at alerts. Like, where can you get trusted information on the most current thing going on, like say with what's going on with malware that's exploiting the Ukraine and Russia situation. So here's one that you go to the alert and tips that's on the CISA.gov US CERT site, and you can see here that they have one: destructive malware targeting organizations in Ukraine. So right now, this is going on right now. This is real time. See, you notice I didn't go to MSNBC, I didn't go to CSNBC, I didn't go to Fox News. No, all those are biased organizations. Or I'm not saying that they don't say things that are right or wrong or whatever. That's not my point. My point is, always consider the source. Whenever you're on, this goes for anything, by the way, not even just cybersecurity, like anything. Always consider the source. Always consider their bias, because there's always built-in bias especially when there's money involved. So this government site right here, they're just putting out alerts. They crank out alerts like crazy, right? And you want to go to a site like this. So this is telling you about what's going on right now, real time, with this attack. It's breaking down the IOCs on this thing, the threat vectors, how they're the best practices, how you can defend yourself, what it's attacking, all kinds of stuff. And this is specifically targeting Ukraine. Let's go back to alerts here. Let's look at, there's one from the Iranian government. There's let me see, another Russian state-sponsored one. There's attacks on Log4Shell. Let's look at that one real quick. Yeah, so this is great information. You'll see this site tied into FBI websites, DOD websites, Department of Homeland Security. All the different government organizations will use this site as a main resource. So that's why they have to get their information right. There's a lot dependent on their information being accurate, because it's talking about cybersecurity of the infrastructure in the United States. So this is a really good source. Another great source, one I use probably every day, is the CVE.mitre.org site. And these are just CVEs. Like, I have to come back here often to look at different vulnerabilities that are in different organizations that I'll do assessments on. This site, I mean, I wouldn't get very far without this site right here. I'm always on this site, on some aspect of the site. So this is a very, very good site. It's talking about incident management, incident detection. They got script stuff that you can use to create scripts on here. Attack vectors that are within the different systems. This is just one of the most magnificent, most comprehensive databases of threats that you're going to find on the internet. the CVEs. If you go to Google and type in CVE, there's a couple of other ones. I think there's one called the National Vulnerability Database that also has CVEs. I'm on the MITRE one. I think the other one is actually better than this one, more comprehensive than this one. But yeah, this is another place where you can get current updates on what's going on as far as what is happening, what kind of threats are out there, what kind of vulnerabilities are out there in particular for this one. Another place you can go to if you don't trust government sites and maybe you're not in the government, you happen to be, you're in the civilian world, you can go to SANS, SANS Cybersecurity, just sans.org/newsletter/news bites. Just go to Google and type in SANS, SANS space news, and you'll find this site right here. But this is a really great site. You can see it's actually referenced in CISA. CISA is a really good site. But it's talking about different attacks that are happening, cybercrime, all over the world, really. So this is a really good site for good news on this stuff. Just the main thing that I want you to come away with is always use critical thinking. We as cybersecurity people, we don't have the luxury of just believing what we see on Facebook, right? We can't just believe what our uncle told us on Facebook, right? We can't take it at face value, right? You got to use critical thinking. That means you got to question everything that you see on the internet, because internet's not a trusted source in and of itself, right? It's just a medium that all of us dump a bunch of information on. Trusted information is people like us who use critical thinking and have to triangulate. Like, we have to use 2 or 3 different sources of valuable information, like 2 or 3 different reputable sources to validate one piece of information to determine if it's real. And then we got to take a step further and interpret that what we just read objectively, right? We can't put emotions involved in it, right? A lot of people that get very politically minded and they're on one side or the other. And I'm not telling you, like, in your own personal life, you can believe whatever the hell you want to believe. But when it comes to cybersecurity, when it comes to doing cybersecurity engineering, when it comes to doing threat assessments, when it comes to doing assessments, you got to use facts, right? From reputable sources, right? Can reputable sources be wrong? Absolutely. And that's where we come in as experts to determine how valid the information is by using 2 or 3 different sources and trying to figure out what's the truth, what are the facts, not the truth. What are the facts in this? What do we actually know? What cannot be disputed, right? To get to the bottom of what is going on. If it's a phishing attack, where's that phishing attack coming from, right? If we can't determine that, what is it trying to attack? How can we actually defend against this particular phishing attack? What can we do to protect our agency, our clients, our customers? We have to use objective facts. We don't have the luxury of just believing whatever we want on Facebook, right? We can't just sit back and just believe everything on Twitter or wherever. We have to, that's why they pay you, because they want you to do that deep dive. And sometimes it's a pain in the ass, but that's our job. So, okay, that's what I want to talk about. If you guys have other sources, please feel free to spout them off. I only named like 3 here that I use for news sources that I trust a lot. But if you guys have other ones, please feel free while we're talking here to spout them off. And there's tons of other ones. There's another one called Threat Posts. That's a pretty good site that's putting out just threats and different attacks and stuff like that that are out there that a lot of organizations do use. I don't know how objective they are or whatever, but sometimes you just want to kind of get the information and then deep dive into that and validate and verify the information you have, right? So please feel free to add any kind of news sources that you guys use for cybersecurity. It's really important, especially in this day and age with all the stuff going on with wars and political intrigue and all this kind of stuff going on. What sources do you guys use out there to validate information, right? To make sure that the different threat vectors are who they say they are. Okay, I see Wayne saying CVE. And Wayne says, great sources, but most importantly, you need to have that patch and that vulnerability plan active and implemented. Absolutely, right? So you got to have a prevention plan. You have to have not only a prevention plan, but a disaster recovery plan if things go south, right? You got to have stuff in place so that it's one thing to know the threats, but it's a whole nother thing to be ready for those threats, right? Especially the main ones. That's what Wayne is talking about. So that's a great point, Wayne. Thank you so much. Okay, let me see. I've got some questions here that I'm going to address. I had one for Facebook that I skipped out last week that I missed. Somebody was talking to me last week. They said, Bruce, you have really made me fall in love with RMF as an analyst. Yeah, there's actually a lot to get into for risk framework, for NIST risk framework, risk management framework, because with this one, what I like about this over analyst work, first of all, let me define each one. So when I'm talking about cybersecurity analyst versus a cybersecurity compliance person, we're talking about an analyst normally is looking at, I would say, real-time data, right? And they're normally looking at real-time data, real-time threats, real-time vulnerabilities, real-time. They're looking at information as it comes in, and then they're having to analyze it, right? That's why it's important, as we talked about before, you have to have real good sources of information, right? Otherwise, it's garbage in and garbage out. You got to have good information coming in to evaluate that information. Use your skills and your experience and your sources as a cybersecurity analyst to figure out what is going on and how can we fix it. And analysts come in many different flavors, right? Some of them don't even go as far as fixing anything. They just determine a risk or something like that. Some of them will recommend you have a risk. Some of them are in the weeds with you and fixing things on the go. But it's usually an analyst is somebody who is evaluating real-time information. Whereas a compliance person, a compliance officer, we're talking about risk management framework, compliance officer, or information system security officer, or information system security person for PCI or Sarbanes-Oxley, or they're looking at policy and stuff, right? They're not really into the weeds on the real-time analyst. They might do that part. That might be part of their job, but their main hat is determining the security posture of the organization. Right? They're looking at the laws and saying, okay, are we meeting this particular security control? Are we meeting the nature of this security control? And if we're not, what can we do about this? Can we mitigate this in a specific amount of time? Can we remediate this in a specific amount of time? If we can't, we got to do a plan of action and milestone. We have to do some sort of a documentation that is a risk response from the organization. So the difference is a cybersecurity analyst is normally looking at real-time information, and they're having to evaluate that information and then make some sort of a determination based off of their the data that they got in, right? And they have to have good information because otherwise it's garbage in and garbage out. And then your cybersecurity compliance officer, your risk management framework person, your information system security officer, they're looking at the security compliance, the security posture of the organization, and are we meeting this security control? There's a lot of crossover between these two because you can have one doing some of the other job and all that kind of stuff. But he's saying he's really fallen in love with risk management framework, and I said there's a lot to love about it, because the thing about cybersecurity analysts is that you constantly you got to be on top of threats like all the time. You got to be on top of information all the time. You got to constantly ingest all this new information on threats, like it's constant. CVEs are your best friend. That's the vulnerabilities that are out there. They're your best friend. But with risk management framework and compliance, you might need to know some of that stuff, like you need to know it, but your main bread and butter is the security controls, which don't typically change but every couple years or so, right? Like they do change, laws do change, all that kind of stuff. You got to keep up with technology and stuff. Like you got this new cloud stuff, like you got to know that stuff, but it's not as real time as your analyst work. So that's one of the real good things about being in compliance, is that it's not as fast paced as, not to say you shouldn't learn this stuff, but it's just not as fast paced as your analyst. And I don't know, there's different interpretations of both those titles. So, take that with a grain of salt. That's been my interpretation of this whole thing. So, all right, let me see if I can get another question in here. King Kwame says, quick question. What will you do if a company has to be compliant to RA5 vulnerability scanning, but don't have any scanning tools? Wait. Let me get this. Let me get this straight. What do you do if your company has to be compliant with RA5, but they don't have any scanning tools? All right. Sorry, I laughed. So if they don't have any scanning tools, if they're not scanning, basically, right? If they're not scanning, then one thing I would probably recommend that they do is do a plan of action and milestone. So that means that, the organization has to say, like, listen, we don't have anything in place to do scanning right now. However, we have a plan to do that, right? We have a plan to buy Nessus license for the systems we're going to scan. Or, you know what? It really depends on the situation. Okay, let's take a small versus a large and medium size organization. Let's say you have a small organization, right? King Kwame, you have a very small organization, right? I've dealt with this before where I'm working with a very small, like literally I have like 5 systems and they're all standalone systems. And the security control for RA5 states that you're supposed to do vulnerability scanning, right? If I'm not mistaken, you have to do vulnerability scanning. You're supposed to have a scanning frequency in place, but that's determined by a policy, things like that. In fact, let me just bring it up while I'm talking. So how do you do that? So my very first question is, does the organization have a policy? Whether they're small or large, they should have a policy that determines how they're going to scan. What is the frequency of their scanning, right? So if they don't have a policy for scanning, that's another violation of another control. Like they're not doing that security control. That would be something I would be a little bit concerned about myself. Like now we have a whole nother issue here. So here we are on the control. This is RA5 that Kwame is talking about. And let's just read the nature of the control. Let's interpret this real quick. Okay. So this security control, very briefly, is saying the organization scans for vulnerabilities on information systems. Okay. They employ vulnerability scanning tools, right? So King Kwame is saying these guys are not doing vulnerability scanning. They don't have the tools, right? So right there, they're already violating it. So, and then it kind of goes into like what kinds of things that they're scanning. What kinds of things come out of the scanning? They're enumerating platforms, software flaws. They're looking for software flaws, things like outdated software. They have a checklist. They have testing procedures. Right. So RA5, it comes with a whole list of things. So my first question now is going to be, does the organization have a policy for this? Because if they don't, then that's another issue. That would be my first question. Now, let's say that they do, but if they have a policy and they don't have a tool that's scanning, then they're basically saying they're doing something they're not going to do. So, okay. So let's put the policy aside. Let's say they don't have a policy. Now, my next question is, can they start scanning? If it's a small organization, my next question is, why don't you scan? Like, is there something that you guys will be willing to? Can you guys do a scan right now? Right? Can we purchase one? They say yes. Okay, when can you do that? Because it's not going to be that expensive for you. You only have 5 systems. All you do is you go on the acquisition site, like an approved acquisition site, whether you're DoD or Department of Navy or whatever. Right? They have an approved list of things that you're allowed to use for scanning. They might even have one already in place for you that you can use from a higher organization, right? If you're in the Department of Defense and small organization, you should be able to have access to that, and they should have the funding to do that, especially to meet the nature of the laws, like FISMA. FISMA states that you must do scanning on a regular basis, right? So number one, I'm going to tell them, listen, you guys need a policy in place. Another thing is, you guys, as a small organization, you guys should be able to get this pretty fast and do scanning. When can you get that tool? If they tell me, well, we can get it probably in 2-3 months, to give me some time, I'd say, hey, do a plan of action and milestone. A plan of action and milestone is where you're gonna tell them, you're gonna say, okay, they're gonna put in writing, Here's why we don't have one. Here's a justification of we don't have one. Here's when we're going to get one. And here are the points of contact who are going to be responsible for that. And here's the tool we're about to get. We should get it in 2 to 3 months. Let's put a specific time on there, right? And then as you go through, you're going to have milestones. Number 1, check the acquisition, see what solutions we can use. Number 2, in 2 months from now, purchase the tool. Number 3, implement the tool. Something like that, right? That's a plan of action, a milestone. You have to document it, basically, is what I'm telling you. If it's a larger organization, it's a little bit more complicated, but it's really the same process. Because the reason I say that is because a large organization should really know better. And it's much more critical for a large organization to have constant scanning. When I say large organization, I mean they have like 100 systems. We're talking about medium to large size. If they have 100 systems and they have 150 employees that are in and out of the facility and doing all kinds of, doing their job. They're operators, they're software engineers, and you've got maybe some system administrators and some managers or something, right? They're in and out of those systems. You really have to do some scanning. Like, it's critical to do scanning in a large environment because you can have all kinds of stuff happen. You can have malware, you can have phishing attacks, you got so much exposure. And the more complex, the larger it is. If they have a DMZ, they have a website, they have a web application, the more complex it is, the more threat vectors, the more surfaces that they have that can be attacked. So it's imperative that they get a scanning tool in there. So I would tell them how critical it was, and I'd want to see their policy immediately. Like, can I see your policy? And if their policy said nothing about scanning, I'd tell them, like, listen, guys, like, we have to do a policy very soon. I would just tell them, like, it's up to you. I mean, it's up to you guys. I'm not gonna force you to do anything, right? But it says right here in the federal law that you're supposed to do this, right? And you should be worried because you could have a virus right now. You could have all kinds of outdated software on your system right now. Your security posture is not good if you not only have no scanning because you can't see what's going on. So yeah, that's what I would do. I would have them implement some sort of a security, some kind of risk response, like a plan of action and milestone, and have a breakdown. I would explain why it was very important for them to have one. That's what I would do. That is a huge concern, you know, and it can be done. Like, especially large organization, they should have the money to do it. Then it's just a matter of telling them how critical it is. Small organizations, you know, it's probably going to be a little bit more. It's going to be a little bit more for them to go do it because they probably don't. They don't know where the money is. They don't know how to get it and stuff. But it's not as crucial because they have like 5 systems or whatever, and they're not connected to the internet, right? So that's what I would do. King Kwame, I hope that answers your question without me rambling on too much. There's another question I had. Let me see if I can go here. I had a couple. It's not really many today. Let me see. I'm on YouTube real quick. If you guys have any questions whatsoever at any time, any videos that I have out there, ask me on YouTube. If you're signed up on the site, ask me there. If you can email me anytime. I use those as content for these videos, and we'll have a long discussion about it. Or if you have any questions whatsoever about risk management framework or any kind of questions about any of the security controls, we can talk about them here. We can break them all down. I'll bring up the charts and everything. We'll talk about it. We'll break it down. Okay, somebody said thank you. This is about the scam stuff. I'm not going to talk about that right now. Would you say an ISSO, an information system security officer, an information system security manager is the government equivalent of a private sector cybersecurity consultant in terms of task? Okay, this is a good question. I actually have experience with both of these things. I'm currently a cybersecurity consultant. I can really speak on this. Here's the question. They're asking if the government information system security officer and a government information system security manager is the equivalent of a cybersecurity consultant. And to that, I would say it really depends on the organization. Because the private sector is much more fluid with how they define roles. They're much more fluid. I've been in a cybersecurity consultant where I specifically did information system security officer work. I was a consultant But they were having me do all the tasks of an information system security officer, and I worked for a government organization as a contractor. And then when I would do my system security plan, or if I would update EMAS, or they had some equivalent to EMAS, it was like Archer or something like that. I would update that. I would put in the implementation statements. I would have to interview people if I was doing an assessment. Everything that you would normally do as an ISSO, I was doing it. And as a matter of fact, they would refer to me as an ISSO from time to time. I was a contractor who was working for a government agency, and my title within the company was a cybersecurity consultant. But when I was on the job, they referred to me as an information system security officer. I say this to say there's a very fluid way that the private sector determines the roles that go with cybersecurity consultant. The only way to really, it's not mapped out as clearly as the government is. The government's very clear with the title. If you're an information system security officer, you do these tasks. If you're a cybersecurity consultant, you do these tasks. If you're an ISSE, you do these tasks. This is what you do, right? Anything else is an extra hat. But in the private sector, it's so fluid. Right now, I'm in a job where I am called something the equivalent of a cybersecurity consultant. I'm a cybersecurity risk consultant, and I'm not an ISSO. Like I'm more like if the equivalent of what I'm doing is more like an auditor or an assessor or something like that. I'm doing more like an auditor or an assessor type work, because I'm coming in. I'm not. Well, there's a difference between what I do and what an assessor will do. I'm coming in and I'll look at the scan data and stuff, and I'll do a report saying, look, here are your main areas of concern. Here's where you need to fix these things right here, and here's your risk level, right? You should focus on these things right here. Whereas an auditor or an assessor that's in the government sector or in the private sector, or traditional auditor, they're going to come in and say, you got all these things wrong. You guys need to fix it, or you not going to get this certification, right? This government certification. So there's a difference between what I'll work with them to get it fixed, whereas an auditor is not working with them to get it fixed. They're like, fix this stuff, and then they pop smoke and then they leave, So different. Like, it really depends on the private sector. You really got to read the job description, because a cybersecurity consultant can be a guy who does all the ISSO tasks. They can also do some of the ISSO tasks, and they can do none of the ISSO tasks. It just depends on the job description. I hope that answers your question out there. Let me see if there's anything else. New Jersey Love says, as a CIO that is interested in rebranding CISO with an emphasis on specialization on risk and compliance, which search should I pursue? Private government sector. Oh, private government sector, please. Thank you. Okay. So let me see if I can answer this question effectively. As a CISO, just rebranding the CISO with an emphasis on, okay, you want to emphasize risk and compliance. Okay. We want to know what certification, emphasize what search should you do? Okay. What search? I can recommend a couple. I can recommend a couple. And this is really my field right here. CISA is one that if you wanted to really rebrand yourself, here's one of them. ISACA has some really good risk certifications. Risk certifications. Let me just show you. If you go to ISACA.org, okay, I just went there. Just go to Google and type in ISACA. That's ISACA. Not common. It sounds weird, but this is it right here. CISA. So CISA is one of the top ones. I see a lot of CISOs with this one. It's a very good certification. It's mostly for auditors. A lot of folks in the private sector use it. But that said, it's also used in the government sector because it's on the 8140, if you know what that is. Or it's also known as the 8570. Both of those list CISA, and it's right up there with the CISSP, by the way. So this one would be one that I would recommend. And Kwame said C-Risk. Yep, I'm going to that one next. So this one right here is really good for, I don't know why they associate this one with risks, but probably because when you're doing risk, you have to do assessments. I imagine that's why they do it. The other one it's a lower certification, however, it's more targeted to what you're saying. It's known as the C risk, which is what Kwame just mentioned here. C risk is another really good one. I don't have this certification. I'm seriously thinking about doing this one because this is exactly what I do in this space. These two things is what I do. C risk is another one if you're trying to rebrand yourself and to focus on risk. Risk is super important for CISO. I mean, super effective for CIO and a CISO because you are trying to determine where the organization is focusing your time, money, and energy, right? So it's very important that you can target where the main risk is. What's the most likely attack? What's the most likely attack vector? And that's why it's super important to know risk, to understand it. So you're not chasing windmills, right? Like there's so many things going on in your organization, especially if you're in a large, important organization where everything's on fire, right? Everything's a problem. Everything, if you're a CISO, if you're a director, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Everybody thinks everything's a fire, but there's only certain things that you really need to pay attention to, right? And that's where risk really pinpoints and says, this right here is where you need to focus all your time on, right? Not the latest Log4j. We don't even have Log4. Log4j, everybody's hair is on fire. Hey, did you know about Log4j? You don't have Log4j in your organization, or you have one instance of it, and it's in a room that's air gapped, like everybody's panicking, but you don't even have it in your organization. So C risk is a good one from ISSO. And this is actually a pretty easy certification from what I heard. Don't take my word for it, but from what I've heard in the industry, this one's not that hard. And I don't think it's not that expensive either. That's why I've been thinking about getting it. It's cheap, it's easy, and it's highly sought after. Let me see. Look at the pass rate. Let me see if I can find the pass rate. They had a pass rate on here before. Anyway, this is a great, highly sought after certification, and it's one step below the C risk. It's kind of different, to be honest with you, than the CISA. CISA is if you're looking at money, if you're trying to make that bank, CISA is much better than C risk. Much better than C risk. But so yeah, these two right here, and I can let me give you some data you can use here, so you can make a more informed decision. So here's where you can check out Indeed.com, handy dandy Indeed.com. Will show you what I'm talking about as far as marketability, right? Let's look at C risk. Let's give this context. We already know CISSP is an awesome certification. So you're going to see how many jobs, and this is looking at one location. Let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of Colorado Springs. Just look all over the United States. Oh, CISM, that's a good one too. But I'll go over that one in a second. But CISM is more for managing type stuff. So that's the focus of it. And for a manager, that's really good. Like that's a really good one. Anyway, look at this. Check this out. I just wanted to show you this. I just typed in CISSP. Here's how many jobs for a CISSP out there, right? And of course, it pays pretty good depending on what place you're at. 24,000 jobs. That's not bad, right? That's in the last like 90 days or something. Now let's type in CISA. CISA is a good certification. Not up there with a CISSP, but it's pretty good. You got about half of that, 11,000 jobs available, right? And these are pretty high level jobs, senior, auditor, it's pretty high level jobs. They're looking for mostly auditors and stuff. And then let's look at C risk. C risk, which is exactly what you're talking about, by the way. C risk, is it risk or is it with a K? I can't remember. Let me just hold on a second. C risk with a C. C risk, okay. Not as many, 3,000 jobs. So I would say CISA. Let me look at CISM for you. Just kind of throw that in the pot. CISM. A lot of managers have that one. Like a lot of my managers will have this one. But the guys who are real good at risk, the guys who are focused on risk, they have either CISA or a C risk. Look at this. Excuse me. Look at this one. 7,000 jobs. 7,000. That's a CISM. CISM is a highly sought after management type certification. What else do I want to show you with this? C-Risk, CISA. Oh, I wanted to show you the 8570. 8570. If you're familiar with this, this is a breakdown. It's like a matrix that breaks down all of the suggested certifications that you get in the Department of Defense. And a lot of federal organizations use this. This has been changed several times, by the way. This is probably not the most current one, but normally they have C-Risk on it. Nope, this one doesn't have C-Risk on it, does it? But CISA is on it right up here with the IAT 3. And then IAM level 3 is CISM. So yeah, CISM, CISA, C-Risk. If you talk about specifically risk, I mean, literally C-Risk and CISA, it focuses on assessments and risk and things like that. So I would highly recommend those over the CISM. But CISM is also an awesome certification. Let me see if there's a more current matrix here out there. They renamed it to 8140. You know how the government is. They're so slow that it's both names are still out there for it. I could have swore C-Risk was on the new one, but I guess I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure it is. And I'm not seeing it. 85, 8140, C-Risk. Whoops, C-Risk. Wow, I'm looking at housing now. Gotta be careful with this. I might accidentally type something that's bad. No, I guess it's not. Wow, really? I could have swore it was on there. Anyway, CISA, I guess, will be your best bet for government. But in the private sector, I could tell you, I've got a couple of my peers have the C-Risk, and my specialty right now, my job description is currently on risk assessments, and the most common certifications are CISSP, CISA is considered up there. C-Risk is one people talk about quite a bit, and to a lesser extent, CEH. You know, the CEH gets into the what scripts to use to do pen testing on this and that. It doesn't really go into risk, to be honest with you. So, okay, hope that answers your question, New Jersey Love. Appreciate that question. Kwame says, Bruce, with your experience, you can pass it without even studying. I got to study everything, man. I'm not one of those guys who could just walking off the street and take it. I wish I was. You know, I'm just not. I don't have that kind of brain. I have to study my ass. Everything I do, man, I have to work my ass off. I've never been given anything, not a single thing. I've not passed a test without studying my ass off. I've not gotten in a relationship without working my ass off. There's not a single thing I can point out in my entire life that I've not had to climb a mountain for. That was worth a damn. Except maybe breathing. I don't know. It's like nothing's given, man. Not to me. Let me see. Somebody said, how often have you seen Contractor ISSM roles? Good question. I only met one Contractor ISSM. Everyone else have been a government thinking about going down this path. Okay. So this is a great question. So the question is, how many ISSM roles have been contractor roles? And I've got experience with this one. Like, I'm going to give you a specific case study, like something that actually happened to me. My last position, all right, my last job, that was 4 years ago. I was working for a federal organization. And as I said, I was an information system security officer, but I was a contractor. And actually, I was a subcontractor, and they brought me in as a for the prime contract or whatever, right? So it's purely ISSOs were contractors in this organization. Now, the person I reported to and talked to in our company, his position was a cybersecurity senior manager or something, right? Is what we called him. But I reported to him just like he was an information system security manager, right? That being said, he was not the information system security manager, right? He was just managing me and several other people within our organization. We reported to an actual government information system security manager, because that person and that role changed 2 or 3 times. So it was at one point it was there was probably 4 or 5 people in that role, right? That's a great point. They're usually an information security a government person, because they are responsible. The way that the government's doing it these days is that they'll have, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, like I'm by no means an expert on this one. I've been out of that space for a bit, because it might have changed, right? But in my experience, what would happen was, the way the government was doing it was that they would have a government GS level person who is an information system security manager, because they need the direct responsibility for that system, whatever systems that they were managing. And it was okay for them to have contractors underneath them to kind of do the work. But they were like the foreman. They were like the person who takes all the responsibility at the end of the day. They're the person who gets the signs off on the system security plan, or gives the final say so or the thumbs up on, okay, yeah, we want this. This is the policy right here. And then they send it up the chain. Or they were the final person after I wrote the document. They would go through it and say, okay, yeah, this plan of action milestone is good. Or nope, we want more information. We want more. This is not a false positive. We need more evidence or whatever, right? They would be the final. That's how the government was doing it when I was like 3 years ago, when I was a contracting information. But to answer your question, do I know of any ISSMs who are contractors? That's a great point. Now that you mention it, I can't even think of one. Even though normally what they would do is I would have a manager who is a contractor above me, but the final say so was still a government person. So I have to say, no, I personally don't know any that, in my experience, I've been doing this for I've been doing this for 20 years, and I didn't know any. They normally had a government person. And the reason why is because it's kind of a conflict of interest if you have if you have a purely contracting person in certain positions where they can kind of determine what's good, like when they can say, oh yeah, they're gonna rubber stamp everything. So imagine a Lockheed Martin person. I'm sure that there are Lockheed, Northrop Grumman information security managers. Okay, don't get me wrong. I'm sure that there are some, and like I said, there have been ones that had that title. But what I'm saying is, it normally goes to somebody above them who is a GS person, who says, okay, they're the final say so, right? That gives the blessing on letting that documentation or that risk go forward. Because otherwise, it's kind of a conflict of interest, because your Northrop, your SAIC, your whoever, right? They're going to be like, they're going to rubber stamp everything. Like, yep, this is good, this is good, this is good. Yep, we're good to go. Let's move on to the next thing, So they have to have that ceiling. At some point, you have to have that person that's in between, that government person, to validate and has the best interests of the government in mind, and not just the interest of the company. So I hope that answers your question. I have not met many, and when I did, it was normally somebody above them who was the real information system security manager. So good luck to your career path. Government, if you do decide to go that route, it's very stable work. Doesn't pay as well as the private sector, but it's very stable work. Meaning that it takes a literal act of Congress to get you fired. So, job security. Afi says, do you offer coaching, personal growth for people? Maybe after purchasing your course. I do ask. I will, after purchasing the course, I will help people if they have specific things that they want. But I have a full-time job right now, so I've gotten this question many, many times. I feel like I just don't have the time to be to do one-on-ones. I have not to say I haven't done them before, but on special occasions for people who I considered who have been with me from the very beginning, I've helped them out. But I stopped doing that because I'm just too busy. I'm just too busy with work. But stay with me. There's a chance that I'll do it in the future, that I'll offer something like that in the future when I have more time, right? If right now my job is, it's a lot of work right now. The risk assessment stuff is a lot of work. Okay, King Kwame says, do you have a training course on DISA, STIG, CAPS, SCAPS, and how to use the STIG viewer? No, but I did do. If you look through some of my free videos on YouTube, you'll find that I have done at least one that's breaking down the STIGs. I got a specific question about this, and I broke it down. I actually had a STIG viewer, and I kind of opened it up and started going through it. So yeah, for free, just go to Convocourses on YouTube and type in STIG viewer, I think. And what I'm doing is I was talking about how to use the STIG viewer, and then how to get that STIG information into a documentation. I think that's what I was talking about. I've only done it like once or twice, but I literally downloaded the STIG, showed you how to use it, import the SCAP information content in there, and then I'm looking at, like, I think it was Windows 10, and then looking at some of the category 1s and 2s and stuff. But this is something I've been asked about a lot, so I might in the future do some full course where I break down how to do all of it, like from scratch. Like, here's the system. Here, like, let's see what findings we have on run the tool, and then see what findings are on there, and then see how you interpret it and what you do as an information security officer. It's something that I've done before, so I could totally teach that. Thank you for your insight. That was my experience as well. If someone gets too much authority, the position would turn into a government position, and there's a conflict of interest. That's been kind of what I've seen, Alfie. Like, that's been my perception of it. Like, they'll have them, but like in name only, right? And then that information still has to go to the next person, who is a government person. And I understand why, because it's too much of a conflict of interest. All right, so let me see. They said, great content. I work in government risk and compliance, GRC, but I don't have enough experience with RMF. And all the jobs that are out there want me to be able to choose a framework from scratch, want to be able to have a chosen framework from scratch, selected security controls, applied security controls, write an SSP, experience with PROAMs. Do you have anything or advice on how to move through all that from the very beginning to the end? Like a case study example, not a high-level overview of risk management framework or book study stuff. I need to be able to move from no framework to maintenance mode with some kind of example. The closest thing that I know, I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but just bear with me on this question. So their question is, they want like a hands-on, like an example of how you do a plan of action, a milestone, an example of how you do an SSP, an example of how you put the controls in, how you treat the controls, to put them in a POAM and stuff like that. The closest thing that I've come to this is my own course, and this isn't like, I'm still working on. That's why my course is cheap, because there's so much information that goes into this. The closest thing to what this person is talking about is my course that I've seen. And my course is talking about a practical guide for documentation for security controls. Like, not only how to interpret them, but how to document them. So, for example, first of all, I'll tell you, like, what's the premise? Like, what's this all about? Like, what is the context of the documentation? Because you got to understand the why, right? I start off with the why. Why do you need to do documentation? And then I go into the overview, like what is a security plan how do you actually implement stuff into a system security plan, right? I talk about implementation statements, which nobody talks about. Blows my mind. Plan of action milestone. You can see those every here and there. But then I go into like, okay, if you had AC controls, how do you, first of all, let's interpret it. I interpret it. Then, okay, how do you do a policy for it? I give you examples and actual samples that are downloadable, and I walk you through like what is in them. So what things you should see as an information system security officer in every policy. And if you don't see it, you should be like, well, hey, we don't have a scope in this policy, right? That's like one of the things you should see in there. Then I go through how do you write the controls for an AC1? Like how do you write that into a policy? How does that appear in a system security plan? How would we put this into a plan of action and milestone? And then interpretation of AC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is the only one. It's pretty in depth. Like that's why it's taking me so long to get through all the families, because it's by the time you get through 2 or 3 of these, like you get it. You're like, ding, ding, ding. I got it. Okay, I know how to write. I think I could figure out how to do SC-1. It's a policy. It should have these 5 things in it. Right. So mine is the only one that I know that does this. The reason why I started doing it is because I didn't see anybody else. I had to figure this stuff out myself. I'm self-taught. I had to literally figure this stuff out myself. And I did it for the government. I did it for contracting, civilian agencies. I did it as a contracting ISSO, as a government ISSO. When I was in the military, I was an actual ISSO in the military. We didn't call it ISSOs, but that's exactly what I did when it was still called DITS cap and DICAP and Rainbow Series. I've been doing this for a long time. It's like, so I was like, there's nothing out there. I would have questions myself, like, how do you do this? And then I would go out and learn it on my own by reading the actual federal guidance. And then I'm like, man, why don't anybody talk about this? Then I would just I would paraphrase it, put it in words that people can understand, and then relate it back to the actual government laws and the policy that you need to have. And, lo and behold, I've been doing this. It's been effective. Like people keep telling me like, man, I get it now. Like it just clicks. Like I understand it. The reason why I created this is because I just didn't see anybody else talking about it. I just didn't see practical examples. I didn't see people talking about how is this used in the real world, not some nebulous, like, one book that I have had to go through because I tried to took the CAP, and I have the CAP certification, ISC2 CAP. There's this certification called ISC2 CAP. I just want to give you an example of what this person's talking about. There's a book for this. And ISC2 CAP focuses on information system security officer work. And there's just not a lot of documentation on it. And because of that, besides the NIST, 800 series, like you got NIST 837 that you should read, 853 you should read, 830, FIPS 199, FIPS 200, like those are all in that test, by the way, right? I'm not trying to give anything away or lose my certification or anything, but that's in the test. So you definitely need to read that. But then I'm like, well, I need more study material. And the only book is this one right here, this official guide. And this book sucks. It is so... Not this one. This is not the right one. There's one called ISC CAP. And this is all CISSP stuff, which is also nebulous, and it also sucks. But my personal opinion, I do have a CISSP, and I want to tell you that certification is it sucks. It makes a lot of money, but it's I don't know how else to put it. I just want to show you guys the ISC2 CAP book that is not my personal favorite. It's a $74 book. Here it is right here. And it just, okay, it does cover the domains on the certification. Like, I don't know if the second edition covers the recent changes, but it does, it's better than nothing. So it does cover the domains, but it doesn't tell you how to be an ISSO. And that kind of bothers me because that's what people really want to know. Like if you are doing this work as a risk management framework person, right, which is what the CAP is telling you how to do. Like it's telling you all the tasks and sources you need, but it's not giving you a real world, how do I put it? A case study. It's not giving you real world examples so you can understand what the hell it's talking about. And it ends up feeling like a dissertation. And if you ever been to college, they have you have to write like a documentation on like the theory of the philosophy of security compliance or some crap, right? And that's all fine and good, but if you're in a Department of Defense and you actually need to write a plan of action and milestone, shouldn't you know how to actually write a plan of action and milestone? Shouldn't you know why? Shouldn't you, like, there's just certain things that just not, and then they don't give you like a case study, like, how do I do this control? How do I do this control? How you, like, that's the stuff you really need to know. And so that's the kind of stuff that I talk about. Like, here's why you need to do this document like this. Like, that's the kind of stuff. Here's why you need to talk to these stakeholders. It just, I don't know. I just, this book is very nebulous. It's better than nothing. I'm not trying to talk crap about Patrick D. Howard or anything. If you ever happen to watch this, Mr. Patrick D. Howard, I've read your book. I've recommended it many times. You probably got many sales off of me. I'm just saying, it just to be more practical. And that's, at some point, maybe I should write something like that instead of complaining about your book. This is the only one out there. So, it's better than nothing. I just wish there was something a little bit more practical with the case studies. Just like even one example would be helpful. Where's my course? So my course, if you're interested, there's free stuff. You don't listen. Sign up is for free. Okay. If you sign up for free. Right here it is at convocourses.com. Convocourses.com. Go there. You'll see this site here. You'll see this site. And you sign up for free. And there's downloadables for free. Check out the downloadables. If you don't like my teaching style, if it's not enough, don't buy it, right? Money back guarantee. If you don't like it, if you purchased it and you don't like it, I'll give you your money back. I'm really just I'm not trying to rip people off, right? I'm trying to get people to learn this stuff, and it would be helpful if I can do this more full time. And that's why I do this, because I could do so much more if I could do this full time. I just don't have the income to do this outside of my job on this site. Site is not, it's doing okay, but it's not, I can't quit my job off this site. But yeah, I've got other courses here. This is what you'll see when you go to convocourses.com. Some of the other courses I have. And I'm expanding. And the reason why this is so cheap right now is because I don't have all the control families yet. But here's the thing. There's already like 20 hours worth of content right here alone. 20 hours on just 5 control families. As I expand it, I gotta increase the price, because this is just too much content to charge so cheap. So that's something for you guys to check out. Just convocourses.com. Sign up is free. Tons of downloadables that are free. And yeah, you can also just go to youtube.com and then type in Convo Courses, and there's tons of free stuff there too. So that's it for today, guys. That's all I have. Thank you so much for all your great questions. I really appreciate it. I found the easiest way to learn risk management framework was to work on the implementation side. Amen. Wow, that's a great one. And that way it's not as overwhelming when you're responsible for answering all the controls. Wow, that's a great point. This is a person who's definitely done this before. And this is a great. So she said, I'm not sure if it's a he or she. This person said, I found the easiest way to learn risk management framework was to work on the implementation side or the admin tech side. That way it's not as overwhelming when you're responsible for answering all the controls. That's a great point. And so one of the benefits that I have is I've worked on both sides as a technical person. And because I've worked on both sides as a technical guy, like breaking down, actually implementing the controls, actually putting the patches on the systems, I know the challenges that the technical guy, the field techs or the system administrators, I know what they have to go through when I'm asking them, when I'm telling them, hey, we need AU3 on this control. Like I actually already know how to communicate with them too, because they don't know what AU-3 is. They don't have what are you talking about? I have to explain to them exactly the nature of the control and the why behind the control, and I have to articulate to that to them in you got to be very specific with them, because their world is Microsoft. Their world is Microsoft, or Cisco or whatever system that they're working on. That's their world. That's the language they speak, the vendor language. They're not speaking in our language, which is, NIST 850. They don't know our language, so we have to speak their language. All right, guys, that's it. I am about to end this one, but thank you so much for all your great insight, man. I really appreciate it. It's a great opportunity every week for us to talk about this kind of stuff that we don't normally get to talk about among peers. And there's more of that on the site on convocourses.com. Go ahead and check it out. It's free to sign up, free downloads, all that kind of stuff. And from time to time, I'll do other